Welcome. Hope you all can hear me pretty fairly well. We're live here, Fight For Liberty Studios. Again, I'm your host, Daniel Chico. Thank you for joining us on this fourth official broadcast episode. We just got done about 40 minutes ago off the Fight For Liberty .com. We did a podcast called The Fight For Truth, which is more a conspiracy-based podcast. Podcast. Damn. But we're just having some fun tonight, doing a short broadcast. Just having a good time, kicking back, talking a little political politics. Now we just heard Ruth Gator Gensberg, of course, unfortunately passed away this evening. She was 80-something years old. And I say, unfortunately, rest in peace, blah, blah, blah. But let's not escape the fact that she was a pedophile sympathizer, that she total pro-abortion, and so on and so forth. It's just insane policies. Of course, she was appointed there by what I referred to him as Sick Willie Clinton, also known as Bill the Sly Killer Clinton. She was appointed that back in 93, I believe, that they appointed her as the justice. And of course, we've gotten some good justices, bad justices over the years. Ruth Gator Gensberg, or whatever the hell her name is. Trying not to cuss tonight. She honestly wasn't that good of a judge. She was absent for 2 years. She didn't show up for 2 years. She was very pro-abortion, so on and so forth. So there's that. I'm not trying to disrespect the dead, but she was very gravely ill for a very, very long time. So there's that too, and that's unfortunate, but it is what it is, folks. It is what it is, as I will always say. I'm not trying to be too controversial and say, well, she deserved to die, so on and so forth. But we do know her policies. We're all aware of what her policies were, and how she was very pro-abortion and so on and so forth. Appointed by, again, Bill Clinton at 93. So, again, we're just having fun. I'm not sure what this episode is really about. I kind of did it on the fly. I was going to do an episode tomorrow, but going to take the weekend off and just enjoy the weekend. Again, we were talking about CIA and so on and so forth, deep state tactics on the fightforliberty.com with the Fight For Truth podcast just recently. A lot of news has come out, and we're going to go ahead and, since we're talking about Gensberg, and kind of weird that her name is Gensberg, kind of makes you question whether or not she was related to the notorious Allen Ginsberg. While we're talking about Gensberg, we're going to go ahead and listen to a clip by the president and see his reaction. This is the president speaking about Ruth Bader.
Yeah. She just died? Wow. I didn't know that. You're telling me now for the first time. She led an amazing life. What else can you say? She was an amazing woman. Whether you agreed or not, she was an amazing woman who led an amazing life. I'm actually sad to hear that. I am sad to hear that. Thank you very much.
So there you have it, the president talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, basically stating that she had an amazing life, so on and so forth. We're getting ready for the debates here in a couple weeks, which I'm excited for. We're going to live stream those for you. It'll be a fun live stream. We'll shoot the crap and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's kind of a cool, chill live stream tonight for the podcast. Thank you for joining us on this Friday evening. Stock markets weren't doing that good today in other news. Obviously, they were down few points. Apple's stock suffered the worst out of all the stocks. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg again, dead at 87. Trump offered to pardon Assange if he revealed the DNC email source, which we all know is probably Seth Rich. Debatable whether or not it was Seth Rich, although the Democrats will continue to say it was the Russians who did it, the hacking, so on and so forth. And we all just know that's just a bunch of malarkey, as our demented former Vice President Joe Biden would say. But if WikiLeaks is over, why not hand over the sources? Why not just be like, okay, I want a pardon, I'm going to hand over the sources. If WikiLeaks is over, this really makes me debate, is WikiLeaks over? I mean, maybe that's what the podcast should be about. Is WikiLeaks over? Do you guys think that WikiLeaks is over? They had such an important role into what has happened with the election and so on and so forth. I mean, is it over? Are they going to drop the dead man switch like they promised to drop? That remains to be seen. In other news, TikTok was officially banned from the United States. Well, not necessarily total ban where you have to have it off your phone, but a ban in a way where you can no longer get it from the App Store on Apple or Google Play. As of Sunday, that will be banned if they do not reach a final agreement with Oracle. However, President Trump can withdraw the order if TikTok is finalizing the deal with the company Oracle, which remains to be seen. So, I mean, it's crazy, folks, what's going on with everything. It seems the riots are finally slowing down, thankfully. Although the BLM rhetoric is still very alive within the culture. And, you know, this is a great example of how we talked about the communist agenda, America under communism. And I was thinking about this the other day, just the influence that the communist agenda has had upon our very way of life is absolutely crazy to think how influential the Communist Manifesto of Karl Marx has become. When, you know, Karl Marx was a loser, folks. There's no way around to say that. He was a freaking loser who thought he was a genius, who didn't get famous until after his life. And I guess that's what the subject is going to be about. It's going to be a rant against communism. I mean, communism has never worked. I mean, it will never work in America. But America is under a communist siege from these such extreme Marxists. I mean, these revolutionaries, as they would call themselves, and they want to refer themselves as revolutionaries, folks. And it's just, you know, Che Guevara and all those other sons of bitches out there. And Marxism just will not work in America. It's going to see the destruction, a total of Western civilization as we know it. And that's what they want. We all know that. That's what they want. But we as the American people have to take a stance against communism and not embrace it. Marx was right. Oh, because what? Our country's failing in your eyes? Or Marx was right because Trump is president? Is that really what it's come down to? That because the president is the president, that Karl Marx was suddenly right? Karl Marx was a failure. He was a failure. He always will be a failure in my eyes. He was never worth anything. I mean, will be a failure in my eyes. It's just, I'm so upset that this is the generation that I have to live through, where we see another frickin' socialist piece of crap, frickin' communist uprising. I never thought that we would see that. I honestly didn't think we'd ever see this happen in my generation, that communism. I've always hated communism since I was a kid. And, you know, I was raised in a Democratic household. Everybody voted Democrat. But I knew for certain that I hated communism. I hated this authoritarian freaking crap that we're going through now. And I know I'm going on a rant here. I know I'm going off the rails a little bit, but that's what this podcast is about. Tonight's podcast is a laid-back podcast where I'm going to be able to say whatever the hell I want, and none of you damn freaking yuppie-ass, hippie-ass tech giants or anybody is going to tell me otherwise. I mean, hell, I burnt my mail ballot on Twitter and my mail ballot request on Twitter, and they still haven't censored me. But this is all about control, folks. The whole thing is playing out in the perfect introduction for communism. This is why we talk about communism and you say, well, you're a crazy freaking right-wing conservative. I mean, I'm not a crazy right-wing conservative. Yes, most of my views are conservative, but I don't agree with a lot of what the Republican Party does. I'm not a registered Republican, and I say that in every damn podcast. But to hear that there's a communist uprising blatant in our faces, and we still act like it's nothing. We act like BLM is not freaking partnering with them. And I'm not saying every person who supports Black Lives Matter, because obviously Black Lives do matter. I'm saying it. Black Lives do matter. I do not support the organization known as Black Lives Matter, but Black lives obviously do matter, folks. But it's not a conspiracy, folks. It's not a right-wing conspiracy that communism is having a takeover. And I think we as Americans need to wake up. In every party, every creed, every race, religion, if you're Democrat, Republican, realize that there is a communist takeover. And realize that even if you're a lifelong Democrat who's gung-ho about the Black Lives Matter movement, that's okay. But you have to realize that your movement is controlled opposition. Your movement is controlled and tracked and by the Communist Party. And now we're seeing the one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement has partnered. She has literally partnered, folks, with the communist Chinese. It's no longer a secret. It is out in your face, and you guys are still blind to it. You're still blind to it. You still think, oh, somehow it's a conspiracy that the communists are taking over, and they think the communists are taking over, and they think that the fascists are taking over. It's the same thing. Fascism, communism, same thing. And right now we're seeing a fascist overthrow by the left. Fascist communist overthrow. They say, well, those are two opposite things. Karl Marx was right. Karl Marx was a loser. I told you that. Only 7 people freaking showed up for the man's funeral, and you're going to call him a freaking martyr? You're going to call him a hero? I mean, give me a damn break, because your college professor, fucking gender studies, I mean, excuse my language, but your gender studies professor said that Karl Marx was such a freaking great guy. All of a sudden, you're going to say, oh, yeah, Marxism is going to work. I mean, we know now that these so-called democratic socialists who follow Bernie Sanders are not democratic socialists. Let's just be plain and simple now. They're communists, folks. They are communists. I mean, there's no way to get around it. They're freaking communists, folks. And it's all become out in the open, but yet we as Americans still seem to turn a blind eye to what is actually going on. We seem to think that these organizations and these politicians still care about us, and these groups and whatever still care about us, and these tech giants care about us because they want to protect our feelings. That's a load of crap, folks, and I'll drink to that one. It's a load of crap. I don't know how many times we have to go through this and talk about communism. I get sick of it, to be frank. But Karl Marx was not really that good of a guy. He frankly hated religion. He wanted to abolish religion. We're going to go over something right here because this is what this podcast is going to be about. Karl Marx, the truth about this hairy, misunderstood man, apparently, to the left. Only a dozen people attended his funeral in London. Yet, far more than a century later, after his death, people still think that he is somehow this great political philosophical genius. And it's just absolutely amazing that people think that. But during his time, Karl Marx was actually very unpopular amongst most people because he wanted to abolish private this, private that. We're not going to be a bunch of hippies living in a freaking commune. I certainly will. If you try to come and take my land or whatever, I will have no problem with having a conflict with you over that. I believe in the right to private property, private everything. As individuals, I believe in individualism. I don't believe in this conformist group mentality that Marxism pushes and continues to push it in our education system, so on and so forth. Pretty soon, communism is going to be taught in the schools, folks. That's just it. That's what's coming. Of course, he wanted a new society, a new man, a socialist communist revolutions that led to murders, enslavement, torture, maybe to about 200 million people. So that's basically almost half the United States, folks, that communism has led in death, to death. Almost 200 million deaths of the American people. And centuries later, he's still popular, and people say, communism is the answer. The communists are showing, folks. They're showing their true colors. The people who you thought were moderate Bernie Sanders supporters are now extreme commie idiots. Now, if you support Biden Harris and you're not a communist, well, good for you. Whatever, I don't care. You have the right to support them. He was a middle-class citizen, too. That's another thing. Karl Marx was middle class. It wasn't like he came out of the gutter and he was like a working class citizen and, down on his luck, so on and so forth. He had an illegitimate child. He was not a good person at all. He was ill-tempered. He was cruel. He was an authoritarian, which we know that because this is all the rise of authoritarianism, and people don't realize that. It still baffles me how this is a solution, how more authoritarianism is a solution to our problems. We got to weed out the people who don't think like that, think like us. Is that really what it is with the Marxists? I mean, he was anti-Semite. He was very racist against black people. He used the N-word, so on and so forth. I mean, he ripped off people. He never had a real job. He was a journalist for a brief time. He smelt. He was disgusting. His personal appearance was disgusting. It never ends, folks. And the Marxists are still going to say, this guy was the greatest or whatever, I'm going on a rant tonight because I'm sick of this communist freaking crap. No one likes the communism. The majority of Americans are not going to stand for this. I could say probably 60%, 70% of Americans will not stand for this. And that includes Democrats and Republicans alike. We're not going to stand for communism, folks. That's how it is. We're not going to stand for communism. And Karl Marx, again, I said, he smelt, he was mean, he was cruel, he was he was a racist in a term. I wouldn't call him a racist because I don't know for certain, but he used racial slurs, so on and so forth. Everything that the left hates is exactly what Marx was. And I'm talking about the left. I'm not talking about liberals who are Democrats and moderate Democrats, whatever you call them, Clinton-era Democrats. I'm talking about these people who are socialist, communist, who are just so vile, and they think that their political philosophy is better than everybody else. They think that Karl Marx was the greatest hero that they've ever had. It makes no sense. I'm still baffled that this is America in 2020, that Marxism is part of the American culture in 2020. I mean, how far have we really come? You want to talk about slavery and racial, social injustice and say, how far have we come from that? How about how far have we come as a political philosophy from authoritarianism and communism when 1776 was supposed to get rid of all this crap? But then Marxism came about in the early 20s and so on and so forth, and then it developed speed and with the USSR and now in modern communist China. So what, as the American people, are we going to take a stand and say, hey, enough is enough of this communist crap? We're not going to stand for that, and we're not going to let people in our country have those views. I mean, they can have those views, but when they start putting them out and saying, we're going to take over, we're going to censor you, that's when it becomes a problem. That's when it becomes dangerous. We're going to burn down your cities if we don't have this election, if Trump isn't taken out of office. I mean, this is seriously dangerous rhetoric, folks. Seriously dangerous. It'd be like me saying, you don't like Trump, so we're going to put you in a camp until you like him. That's basically what they have stated. Again, I cited Project Veritas previously saying that that's what they stated in my Radical Left episode 3 of this podcast. So what are we as the American people? Are we going to take a stance? Are we going to go to civil war? What happens to America after this point when there's a total freaking communist takeover? Will we see a complete socialization of our country where everything becomes a class war as Marx wanted? Marx wanted a class war. He wanted everybody to be after each other. He wanted total chaos, if you really think about it. And he thought that he was fighting for the working man, but he was not fighting for the working man. He was dividing the working man. A divide and conquer ideology. And now people call conservatives crazy for saying that communism is having an uprising within our country, but it's no longer a crazy conspiracy theory, folks. It is a fact. Black Lives Matter activists have come out full support for communist China, pro-organizations of the CCP. What are we going to do as people? What are we going to do as American citizens about this? It's crazy, folks. It's crazy that we're living in these times, because I never thought as an individual, as a teenager growing up, that communism would become such a popular political philosophy amongst many people my age. We need to keep the spirit alive. And that's what this podcast is about, keeping the spirit alive of 1776. And I think the next episode of the Fight For Liberty podcast will be about our founding fathers and their achievements and their accomplishments. And they want to take them down, call them the authoritarians, call them that they were the ones who were driving the slave train, whatever. I mean, Washington's mind changed a lot about slavery. Our founding fathers, such as Richard Henry Lee, were very against the idea of slavery. In fact, some of the founding fathers were some of the first people to actually advocate against slavery. But they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about all the good things that America's established. They want to talk about the dark, cold things that America has. The skeletons in the closet, sort of say, you don't know your true history. I know damn well my true history. And they say, well, you don't know your true history because we stole land from the Native Americans. Now, let me tell you something about that. Although it might be controversial amongst some people I know. I come from a Native American background. And I've always thought, the natives got a crappy deal. They got the crappy end of it, folks. And in a lot of ways, they did. In a lot of ways, they did get the crappy way, the end of it. But in a lot of ways, they willingly gave up their land for trades, for goods, for food or shelter, or whatever. In a lot of ways, I think they would have remained primitive had the founding fathers not come and colonize America. So there's two sides to every story, folks, and some people ignore the fact that there's two sides to that story. They think that the natives were completely innocent, but we have to remember that a lot of them weren't innocent, and a lot of our guys weren't. Our founding fathers weren't innocent either. Yes, we had wars with them, but we also, everybody tries to paint a bloody picture of our relations with the Indian tribes in America. Try to say, oh, you know, they were so against the natives and they hated them and they wanted to take their land. No, the fact is that Native Americans actually really got along with some of the founding fathers. They loved them. And of course it wasn't always kumbaya all the time. They had wars, they battled it out for land, so on and so forth. I'm acknowledging that part of the history. So don't say I'm trying to hide from our true history. I know our true history, folks, and it's a mixed bag of frickin' trail mix or whatever you want to call it. And the fact is that we weren't innocent. They weren't innocent from my research. A lot of them sold their land for goods, such as food, blankets, alcohol, so on and so forth. So, in a way, it was a fair trade, but in a way, it wasn't a fair trade. I agree. It's a mixed bag of nuts, folks, when it comes to the Americans, Native Americans, and the founding fathers. They called it stolen land, folks. And it's just, when I think about it as, you know, it is a dark day in America to think that we have come to this communist, American, hateful, all of a sudden you're a Nazi for loving your country or for saying that the founding fathers were good people. You're a Nazi. You're a hateful, racist bigot is always their argument, folks. And that is sad. It's a sad day in America to think that. When will we as Americans stand up and say, hey, we want to bring patriotism back. And we want to bring it back in a unity form where we know that capitalism works. We've seen it work. We've seen it work so well. And people say, well, you increased the debt. Yes, the debt is increased, but only because the Federal Reserve had to get involved. Only because the feds have gotten involved with our money. Now we're in debt to them, which is wrong. I say we end the Federal Reserve, we clear the debt, start from zero again, and we move on with our lives. Don't let the Federal Reserve print our money. Bring back the gold standard, so on and so forth. You can have the dollar as a backing to the gold standard, but there's no gold in Fort Knox, folks. That's the truth. I'm going to tell you that right now. There's no gold in Fort Knox. And it might seem like I'm ranting here, which I kind of am, but it is a dark day in America, folks, to see that this communist uprising is happening. But we have hope. We have hope. We have hope that the president will definitely uphold the Constitution, assign Supreme Court justices to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who will uphold the Constitution, who will uphold the Second Amendment, who will fight for pro-life rights, because these baby killers need to get out of here too. I'm sorry. I'm done with that too. This is a rant I wanted to go on the other day too, where people are saying, Planned Parenthood, screw Planned Parenthood. Honestly, screw Planned Parenthood. They're a bunch of freaking disgusting Satanists who get off to murdering babies. I mean, there's a doctor in my state who literally got confronted about murdering babies, and he said he gets off to it. Oh, well, 30% of Planned Parenthood only goes to abortions. 30% is way too much anyways. It's unbelievable, folks, that we're defending our taxpayer dollars going to something that we don't believe in. We don't believe in it, folks. We don't believe in killing babies. I'm sorry. We as conservatives do not need to pay for your damn condoms or your damn abortions. Buy your own. I mean, I still don't think Planned Parenthood, even if I was pro-choice and I was a left-wing nut job, I still don't think Planned Parenthood is the place to frickin' do that business. The fact of the matter is that they've been caught selling baby parts. They're corrupt. They hardly even do any prenatal care. I can expose the video. I can send it out on the Fight For Liberty podcast page and Facebook, Twitter, social media links, so on and so forth, and tell you that they do not do prenatal care like they claim. Folks, this is just crazy that we are living in such an insane time with these selfish damn millennials who think they're so damn uprighteous asswipes, who think that they're better than Christianity, that they think that they're better than America, but they ain't crap. They're a bunch of sorry soy boys, communist pricks, middle class, average freaking white folk who never knew any hardship in their lives. We have it so easy as Americans. We have such a great country. We have it easy. I mean, some Americans, yes, don't have it so easy. The poor people don't have it so easy. But even the poorest in this nation have it easier than the poorest of other nations who are barely even getting a piece of food. The poorest in our nations at least get freaking $300, $400 worth of food stamps where they can eat. But the poorest of other nations can hardly even scrape by for a piece of bread. But yet we're complaining as white, middle class, stuck up, atheist assholes that think we're so self-righteous, that think we have the solution. You guys don't have the solutions. And we're taking this country back, and we're going to take it from you freaking idiots who think that you're so self-righteous that you guys can be the moral police. Who made you the damn moral police? And I always say this about both people who act self-righteous and the church. The church, their job is for morality, but don't get into our politics. And the politics don't get into our morality. That's why it's called separation of church and state, folks. But I'm ranting here. I need to get off. It's been a long night, but America is under siege against a communist takeover, folks, and we need to do something about it. I'm your host, Daniel Chico, signing off with the fightforliberty.com.